Mosenekes' report is scathing against the health department's former leaders. He says it's improbable that they didn't know about the deaths of mentally ill patients. eNCA reporter Zikhona Tshona has been following the story for us. Zikhona, it's been a fairly long haul for you as a reporter on the story and for many others covering the story too. But today, when that judgment was announced, there was a sense for those of us watching that the case had been properly exhausted and investigated.
Certainly, I think many of the family members as well as the legal representatives there really do feel that the former Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke was very fair in the way that he handled all the witnesses and all the information that was given to him. I mean, the Ombudsman described this report as groundbreaking, saying that he dealt with a lot of things that he fleshed out in his report quite adequately well, but he's also given him a lot of work to do, because now he has to go back and apply some of these things that have come out of this report into the work that the health department is going to do in future. Now, very damning for those health officials that you've mentioned, Dr. Magabo Manamela, Dr. Bani Silibano, and the former Gauteng Health Department, who all maintained throughout their testimonies that they didn't know that people were dying. Now, obviously, Joe, we know now that's not true. We had NGOs that went as far as to court to stop this process, saying that it's going to be a death trap for these patients. Dikgang Moseneke using words such as it was inhumane. It stripped not only the patients, Joe, but also the family members of these patients of their dignity.
I want to come back to the issue of the implicated officials in a moment, but let's first look at the awards made. I mean, talk us through the decisions he made in terms of compensation for trauma, compensation for funeral expenses, and indeed for constitutional damages.
Now, this is where the families feel that they've really won. If you remember, the state had always argued that it doesn't want to compensate the families for constitutional damages. That's the violation of rights enjoyed by the patients who passed on. So the state was saying that it doesn't feel family members should be compensated for that, but they should rather compensate the family members for the trauma that they went through as a result of this tragedy. So they will be compensated for constitutional damages, which is the amount of 1 million rand. The funeral and trauma compensation was not really disputed. I think all parties agreed that family members do deserve to be compensated for those. It was agreed upon between the parties prior to even this judgment today being announced. So we know that an amount of about 20,000 rand for the funeral cost and 180,000 rand for the trauma as well as shock that the family suffered as a result of this tragedy.
We see there's no actual recommendation of criminal charges. On what grounds did the judge decide he wasn't going to go there?
Now, the former Deputy Chief Justice is saying, Joe, that there is already a police investigation underway. So he's leaving it up to the police to continue digging, to continue investigating. And he's basically saying that as the arbitration hearing, they've handed over all the recordings, all the documents that have been available to the hearings to the police, and they expect the police to do their work. We know that the police have shown in the past that they have used the arbitration hearings in conducting their investigation, because that's how the numbers kept on going up. They would use the testimonies of the families as leads as to where they could find other deceased patients. So I think he's trusting that police will do their work in this. I mean, family members are a bit disappointed in that they feel that a police investigation may take more time if it's not coming from the former Deputy Chief Justice as a recommendation that so-and-so needs to be prosecuted. So there were names that were basically stated out as people that need to be prosecuted. But family members have maintained that they want to see people going behind bars for the role that they played in this tragedy.
She acted with impunity, thinking that she'll get away with it, because the users and their families were vulnerable and poorly resourced. She acted with an ulterior motive that remains concealed.
So quite an important result there. We've waited for it for a long time, and it certainly seems to be well received. Thank you so much for putting us in the picture. Zikhona Tshona, our reporter, who has been covering that story very closely for us.